She had always loved music. From the moment she could remember, the sound of piano keys had filled her small home. Her family did not have much, but they had an old, slightly worn piano that had been in the house for decades. Its keys were yellowed and some of the pedals were loose, but when she pressed them, the notes sang in a way that made everything else fade away. She would spend hours in her room, fingers moving carefully over the keys, imagining herself on grand stages, performing for audiences who would be moved by her music. Even though she was alone most of the time, she never felt lonely when she played. The local school had announced auditions for a special choir performance. The idea of joining thrilled her. She had always wanted to be part of something bigger than herself, to share her music and her voice with others. More than that, she wanted to prove to herself and to everyone who had ever doubted her that she could do something remarkable. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the notice. She had been practicing piano for years, but she had never performed in front of anyone who could judge her skill. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. On the day of the audition, she arrived early, clutching her music sheets. She looked around at the other students, many of whom seemed confident and experienced. Some were whispering to each other, laughing, and adjusting their instruments. She felt a flicker of doubt. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she made a mistake and everyone laughed? But then she remembered the hours she had spent practicing in her room, the countless times she had corrected a note or a rhythm until it sounded just right. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had worked hard and that her love for music was what mattered most. The choir director was a tall, stern figure with sharp eyes and an air of authority. He was known for being exacting and critical, and many students feared his judgment. When she walked in, he barely looked at her, his eyes scanning her quickly before turning back to the other auditions. She felt her stomach tighten. He had a reputation for being harsh, and she knew that one wrong note could result in harsh criticism. When it was her turn, she stepped forward, set up her music, and took a deep breath. The first note she played trembled slightly, but as she continued, her fingers found their rhythm. She played the piece she had practiced countless times, letting the music flow through her. For a moment, she felt as though she was in her room again, alone with the piano, the rest of the world disappearing. She poured all her emotion into the piece, hoping it would be enough to show her true talent. The choir director listened with a cold expression. When she finished, there was a pause that felt much longer than it actually was. Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet room. He mocked her performance, pointing out mistakes that were perhaps minor but emphasized with sharp words. He laughed at the way she had fumbled a few notes, ignoring the effort and passion she had poured into the music. Her face flushed, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. She had expected criticism, but the way he ridiculed her in front of everyone else stung deeply. She gathered her music sheets and left the room quickly, trying to hold back tears. Outside, the hallway felt brighter and colder at the same time. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, trying to calm herself. The voices of the other students faded as she focused on her own heartbeat. For a moment, she felt defeated. The ridicule had hurt more than she had expected. She questioned whether she was really good enough, whether her dream of performing and being recognized was just a fantasy. As she walked home, she tried to remember why she loved music in the first place. It wasn't for applause or recognition. It wasn't for approval from others. It was because playing the piano made her feel alive, made her feel something real. That thought gave her a small spark of hope. She could still practice, still improve, still work toward the dream she held in her heart. The choir director's words could not take away her love for music. At home, she sat down at the old piano, running her fingers over the keys. The familiar sound comforted her, and soon she was playing again, slowly at first, then with more confidence. She repeated the piece she had played at the audition, this time for herself alone. Every mistake she had made before now seemed like an opportunity to learn. She played each section over and over, correcting the notes that had caused her to stumble, letting the music become more fluid and expressive with each attempt. Days passed, and she kept practicing in secret, determined to improve. The ridicule she had faced became a quiet motivator, pushing her to work harder. She began to experiment with more complex pieces, challenging herself to master techniques she had never tried before. There were times when she felt frustrated and wanted to give up, but every time she sat at the piano and let her hands move across the keys, she remembered why she started. The music itself gave her strength. Her family noticed her dedication. They did not always understand the technicalities of music, but they saw the joy it brought her and the determination in her eyes. They encouraged her, offering small words of support and quiet praise. Knowing that someone believed in her helped her continue on her path. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Persistence and dedication mattered just as much. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly challenging piece, she felt a moment of clarity. Her fingers moved smoothly over the keys, the notes flowing naturally, and she realized that she had improved more than she had imagined. She could feel the emotion in the music, the story it told, and she knew she was ready for another chance to perform. Not for anyone else, but for herself, to prove that she could rise above ridicule and transform it into something beautiful. She began to think about the next opportunity, planning quietly in her mind. She imagined performing in front of an audience that would be captivated by her skill and her emotion. She dreamed of the day when even the choir director would have to acknowledge the depth of her talent. But more importantly, she dreamed of the day when she could play freely, without fear, letting the music express everything she had felt in the moments of doubt and struggle. Even as she prepared for the future, she never let the past entirely fade. The memory of being mocked stayed with her, but she learned to use it as fuel rather than as a burden. Each time she played, she reminded herself of that day, not to feel pain, but to feel determination. She had a goal, and every note she played brought her closer to it. Her friends at school began to notice the change in her. She carried herself with more quiet confidence, and when she shared her music with them, they were amazed by how much she had improved. Some even asked her to play at small gatherings or events, giving her small stages to gain experience and confidence. Each of these moments, though small, reinforced her belief in herself and her talent. She realized that success was not immediate. It would take time, patience, and continued effort. But for the first time, she truly believed that she could reach her dream. The ridicule of the choir director, which had once felt like a crushing blow, now seemed like a distant shadow, something that had taught her resilience and the value of perseverance. She had discovered that true talent was not just about skill, but about courage, dedication, and the willingness to continue even when others doubted you. As the sun set one evening, she played a final piece, letting the music fill the quiet room. Her fingers danced over the keys, producing notes that were no longer hesitant, but confident and expressive. She closed her eyes, feeling the music flow through her, and for a moment, she forgot everything else. The criticism, the fear, the doubt. All that mattered was the sound she created, the story she told through her music, and the sense of accomplishment she felt deep in her heart. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, and more obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that she had something that no one could take away. Her love for music, her determination, and her unwavering belief in herself. And with that, she was ready to face whatever came next, one note at a time. After the humiliation at the audition, she returned home feeling heavy and exhausted. The ridicule of the choir director lingered in her mind, but she refused to let it define her. She sat at the old piano in her room, hands resting lightly on the keys, and took a deep breath. Music had always been her escape, her refuge from a world that could be cruel and unkind. And now, more than ever, she needed it. She started with simple scales, letting her fingers move slowly and carefully, feeling the familiar rhythm flow through her. Then she began practicing the piece from the audition again, this time without pressure or judgment. Mistakes were no longer humiliating but simply steps toward improvement. She played each section over and over, slowly at first, and then with increasing confidence. The notes began to sound cleaner, the rhythm steadier, and the melody more expressive. The days that followed were filled with long hours of practice. She experimented with new pieces, sometimes trying to play works that seemed almost impossible for her level. When she stumbled, she didn't stop. She would repeat the same passage countless times until her fingers remembered every note, every movement. The more she practiced, the more she realized that the true challenge was not the music itself, but her belief in her own ability to succeed. Her family noticed the change in her. They did not always understand the technical details of her practice, but they saw the dedication in her eyes and the joy on her face when she played. They offered encouragement, small words of support that kept her spirits up. Sometimes, her younger siblings would sit and listen quietly, captivated by the sound of the piano. Their admiration made her feel proud and reminded her that her music had power beyond her own satisfaction. One afternoon, as she was practicing a particularly difficult piece, there was a soft knock on her door. She looked up to see a retired music teacher from the neighborhood standing there. He had heard her playing through the open window and had come to offer guidance. He spoke with a gentle voice, full of warmth and understanding. He did not criticize or judge, but instead encouraged her to keep practicing and helped her refine certain techniques. Under his guidance, she learned new ways to approach the piano. She discovered how to express emotion more clearly through dynamics, how to make the melody flow naturally, and how to overcome technical challenges with patience. Each lesson, though sometimes challenging, gave her new confidence. She began to see that improvement was not a matter of talent alone, but of consistent effort and the willingness to learn. As the weeks passed, she noticed subtle changes in her playing. The notes became more precise, her rhythm more assured, and the music she created seemed to carry more emotion. She would play pieces that once seemed impossible, and now they came together in a way that made her heart swell with pride. The old piano in her room, once just a familiar object, had become a bridge between her dreams and her reality. She also learned to face the lingering fear from the audition. Memories of the choir director's ridicule would sometimes surface, especially when she imagined performing again. But now, instead of letting those memories discourage her, she used them as motivation. Each time she played, she reminded herself of the power of perseverance, of the hours she had spent mastering each note. The ridicule that had once hurt her became a quiet force driving her forward. Her dedication began to attract attention in small ways. Friends at school noticed her growing skill and began asking her to play for them during breaks or small gatherings. Even some teachers took note, impressed by her improvement and the passion in her performance. These small moments of recognition reinforced her belief in herself. She was beginning to see that success was not only about grand performances, but also about the quiet victories that came from consistent effort. One evening, she decided to challenge herself with a piece she had always admired but never attempted because of its complexity. She spent hours working through it, sometimes frustrated, sometimes elated when she finally mastered a difficult passage. The process taught her patience and resilience. She learned that mastery was not a sudden achievement but a journey of incremental progress. Through all of this, she kept a private journal of her progress. She wrote about her struggles, her triumphs, and her dreams. Reading back on her entries, she could see how far she had come, and the reflection filled her with quiet pride. The journal became a source of encouragement, a reminder that her dedication was leading her toward something meaningful. One afternoon, she decided to play the piece from the audition again, just for herself. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and let her hands move naturally over the keys. The music flowed more smoothly than before, and she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She realized that she was no longer the same person who had walked into that audition, nervous and unsure. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected to the music she loved. Her mentor noticed this change as well. During their lessons, he would smile and nod, encouraging her to push further. He taught her that emotion in music was just as important as technical skill, and that the ability to convey feeling could make even a simple piece extraordinary. She absorbed these lessons eagerly, experimenting with ways to make her playing more expressive, more alive. As she continued to practice, she began to imagine future opportunities. She dreamed of performing in recitals, competitions, or community events. These dreams gave her something tangible to work toward, a vision of success that motivated her every day. She understood that reaching that level would require continued effort, but the thought of performing again, this time with skill and confidence, filled her with hope. Despite the growing confidence, there were moments of doubt. Some days, she would struggle with a piece, make mistakes repeatedly, or feel that progress was too slow. On these days, she would take a break, breathe deeply, and remind herself of why she loved music in the first place. She returned to the piano with renewed focus, determined to overcome any obstacle. She also began to connect with other young musicians in her community. They would share pieces, practice together, and offer feedback. These interactions broadened her perspective, exposing her to new techniques and styles. She realized that music was not just a solitary pursuit, but also a shared experience that could inspire and connect people. As the months went by, she grew more comfortable with her own abilities. She began to play with more confidence in front of others, whether it was friends, family, or small gatherings at school. Each performance, no matter how modest, reinforced her belief in herself and her passion for music. She began to see that recognition and respect were earned not through talent alone, but through persistence, dedication, and the courage to keep trying. Through all of this, she never lost sight of the joy that music brought her. Even after long hours of practice or challenging lessons, she would sit at the piano and play simply for the love of it. These moments of pure connection with the music reminded her that success was not just about accolades or approval, but about the deep satisfaction of doing something she loved. She also began to notice a change in her mindset. Where once she had been fearful of failure, she now embraced challenges as opportunities to grow. The ridicule she had faced no longer held power over her. It had become a stepping stone on her path. She had discovered that true strength came not from avoiding criticism, but from facing it, learning from it, and continuing forward. One evening, as she played a complex piece she had been working on for weeks, she felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond technical skill. She had transformed her fear and humiliation into growth and resilience. The music flowed effortlessly, and she realized that she had changed. She was no longer the girl who had left the audition in tears. She was a musician, confident in her abilities, and ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but she knew she was on the right path. Each note she played, each piece she mastered, brought her closer to her dream. And with every practice session, she strengthened not only her skill, but her courage, determination, and love for music. She had learned that true talent was not measured by the approval of others, but by the dedication, passion, and resilience one brings to their craft. Weeks passed, and her dedication to the piano began to show in subtle ways that made her quietly proud. Friends and family noticed how her playing had become more expressive, more confident. Small moments of recognition started to appear. A friend would pause to listen as she practiced, or a neighbor would peek in and remark on how beautifully she played. These tiny affirmations were powerful, reminding her that the effort she had poured into every hour of practice was visible to others. She began participating in small events organized by her school and local community. These were not grand stages with large audiences, but they were opportunities to share her music and grow her confidence. At first, she was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she approached the piano. But as soon as she began to play, her focus shifted entirely to the music. The notes flowed, and the melodies told a story that words could not express. The audience often reacted with quiet applause, smiles, or expressions of surprise. Sometimes, she caught a glance from the choir director, who seemed to be observing from a distance. At first, his expression remained neutral, but she noticed subtle changes over time. Occasionally, there was a flicker of surprise or a small nod of acknowledgement. These glimpses encouraged her, but she did not play for approval. She played because it was part of her, a piece of who she had become. Her mentor continued to guide her, pushing her to experiment with more challenging pieces and teaching her how to infuse emotion into her performances. He emphasized the importance of storytelling through music, of conveying feeling with every note. Under his careful instruction, she learned to connect deeply with each piece, understanding not just the technical aspects but the emotional nuances as well. Each lesson added layers to her skill and confidence, making her performances richer and more compelling. As she gained confidence, she also discovered the joy of collaboration. She met other young musicians, each with their own instruments and talents. Together, they explored new compositions, learning to listen to one another and create harmony. These experiences broadened her understanding of music and reinforced the value of shared creativity. She realized that music was not only about individual skill but about connection, empathy, and cooperation. She also began to experiment with her own compositions. Using the techniques she had learned and the emotion she felt, she started to create small pieces that expressed her personal experiences and feelings. These compositions were raw and unpolished, but they carried authenticity and heart. Playing her own music gave her a new sense of freedom and creativity, reinforcing her belief that her voice mattered and that her perspective could touch others. Weeks passed, and her dedication to the piano began to show in subtle ways that made her quietly proud. Friends and family noticed how her playing had become more expressive, more confident. Small moments of recognition started to appear. A friend would pause to listen as she practiced, or a neighbor would peek in and remark on how beautifully she played. These tiny affirmations were powerful, reminding her that the effort she had poured into every hour of practice was visible to others. She began participating in small events organized by her school and local community. These were not grand stages with large audiences, but they were opportunities to share her music and grow her confidence. At first, she was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she approached the piano. But as soon as she began to play, her focus shifted entirely to the music. The notes flowed, and the melodies told a story that words could not express. The audience often reacted with quiet applause, smiles, or expressions of surprise. Sometimes, she caught a glance from the choir director, who seemed to be observing from a distance. At first, his expression remained neutral, but she noticed subtle changes over time. Occasionally, there was a flicker of surprise or a small nod of acknowledgement. These glimpses encouraged her, but she did not play for approval. She played because it was part of her, a piece of who she had become. Her mentor continued to guide her, pushing her to experiment with more challenging pieces and teaching her how to infuse emotion into her performances. He emphasized the importance of storytelling through music, of conveying feeling with every note. Under his careful instruction, she learned to connect deeply with each piece, understanding not just the technical aspects but the emotional nuances as well. Each lesson added layers to her skill and confidence, making her performances richer and more compelling. As she gained confidence, she also discovered the joy of collaboration. She met other young musicians, each with their own instruments and talents. Together, they explored new compositions, learning to listen to one another and create harmony. These experiences broadened her understanding of music and reinforced the value of shared creativity. She realized that music was not only about individual skill but about connection, empathy, and cooperation. She also began to experiment with her own compositions. Using the techniques she had learned and the emotion she felt, she started to create small pieces that expressed her personal experiences and feelings. These compositions were raw and unpolished, but they carried authenticity and heart. Playing her own music gave her a new sense of freedom and creativity, reinforcing her belief that her voice mattered and that her perspective could touch others. With each small success, her self-confidence grew. She no longer felt defined by the ridicule she had faced at the audition. Instead, she viewed it as a turning point that had sparked her determination. The memory of the choir director's laughter transformed into motivation, reminding her why she had continued to practice and why she loved music in the first place. She began to see that true growth often comes from challenges and that overcoming obstacles strengthened both skill and character. Her friends became an important support system. They encouraged her to keep performing, attended her small recitals, and shared in her excitement when a new piece finally came together perfectly. Their belief in her fueled her own belief, creating a positive cycle of encouragement and achievement. She realized that success was not solely measured by skill or recognition but by the joy and connection that music brought to herself and others. One afternoon, she was invited to perform at a community gathering. The audience was larger than she was used to, and the atmosphere felt charged with anticipation. Her hands shook slightly as she approached the piano, memories of the earlier ridicule flickering in her mind. But as she played the first notes, she felt the familiar flow of music envelop her. Her fingers moved with precision, her heart guiding the emotion behind every note. The audience responded in ways that surprised her. People leaned forward, eyes focused on her hands and the expressions she conveyed through the music. Some smiled, others closed their eyes, lost in the melodies. The applause at the end of the performance was warm and genuine, not just for technical skill but for the feeling she had brought to the room. She felt a rush of accomplishment and pride that went beyond any previous recognition. The choir director was in attendance, and she noticed him standing quietly at the back. He did not speak or applaud immediately, but she caught his gaze. It was difficult to read, but there was something different in his expression, perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps curiosity. She did not dwell on it, though. The performance was hers, and the response from the audience reminded her why she had continued her journey despite earlier criticism. Encouraged by the experience, she sought more opportunities to perform. She joined small music clubs, attended workshops, and collaborated with other young musicians. Each experience expanded her skill and confidence. She learned how to adapt to different audiences, how to communicate her emotion through music, and how to handle the pressure of performing. These experiences were invaluable, providing both technical growth and emotional resilience. During this time, she also focused on refining her audition piece. She practiced it meticulously, breaking it down into sections and perfecting each one. She experimented with dynamics and phrasing, making the piece more expressive and polished. Her hands and mind grew in sync, moving fluidly over the keys as if the music itself guided them. Each successful practice session reinforced her confidence, and she felt a growing sense of readiness for a larger stage. Despite the progress, there were moments of self-doubt. Occasionally, she would hear the echo of the choir director's laughter in her mind, or she would wonder if she was truly good enough. On those days, she would take a step back, reminding herself of how far she had come. She reflected on the countless hours of practice, the guidance of her mentor, and the encouragement of friends and family. She realized that these experiences had strengthened her in ways that criticism alone could never have achieved. Her dedication also inspired those around her. Younger students began to watch her practice and perform, intrigued by her skill and passion. Some even asked her for advice or lessons, and she was happy to share her knowledge. Teaching others helped her understand her own progress and reinforced the value of persistence and patience. It also reminded her that music was not just personal but a way to touch and inspire others. As her reputation quietly grew, so did her ambition. She began to envision performing in larger venues, perhaps even competing in regional or national events. These dreams were no longer distant fantasies but tangible goals she could work toward. She understood that achieving them would require continued dedication, but she was ready to embrace the challenge, fueled by the growth she had already achieved. Each day, she returned to her piano with renewed focus, experimenting with new pieces, refining old ones, and occasionally composing her own music. The journey was demanding, but it was also deeply rewarding. Every note she played carried a story, a reflection of her persistence, resilience, and passion. She knew that her journey was about more than just skill. It was about growth, courage, and the love of music itself. In quiet moments, she would reflect on her journey so far. The memory of ridicule had not disappeared, but it no longer held power over her. Instead, it had become a marker of how far she had come, a reminder that challenges can be transformed into opportunities for growth. She understood that success was not immediate and that true achievement came from consistent effort, self-belief, and a willingness to persevere. One evening, after a long practice session, she played a particularly emotional piece she had been working on for weeks. The music filled the room, carrying a depth of feeling that reflected her journey. As she finished, she sat back and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride that went beyond any applause or recognition. She had grown not just as a musician, but as a person, learning the value of perseverance, passion, and self-belief. With her confidence steadily growing, she looked ahead to the next stage of her journey. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that she had the skills, the resilience, and the determination to face them. The ridicule she had once feared had been replaced by a quiet, inner strength that could not be shaken. She was ready for the opportunities ahead, prepared to share her music with a wider audience, and determined to let her talent shine, no matter what obstacles remained. The day came when she was invited to perform at a much larger event than she had ever played before. It was a school-wide concert, attended by students, teachers, parents, and local community members. The stage was grand, the lights bright, and the audience far larger than any she had faced. She felt her stomach tighten with nervous energy, remembering the audition where the choir director had mocked her. The memory was sharp, but instead of fear, she felt a steady resolve. She had worked too hard, and she was ready to prove herself. Not for anyone else, but for the love of music that had carried her through the past months. Backstage, she took a deep breath and focused on the music. She adjusted her sheet music and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. She thought about every hour she had spent practicing, every mistake she had corrected, and every lesson her mentor had taught her. Each of those experiences had brought her to this moment, and she felt a quiet confidence that this was her time to shine. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage and saw the audience waiting, their faces expectant. She glanced briefly at the choir director, who was seated in the front row. His expression was unreadable, and for a moment, she felt the old fear stir. But she pushed it aside, reminding herself that she had earned this moment through effort and perseverance. She sat at the piano, took another deep breath, and let her fingers find their place on the keys. The first notes filled the hall clear and strong. Her hands moved with precision, yet there was an emotional depth in her playing that captivated the audience from the very beginning. She had mastered the technical challenges of the piece, but more importantly, she conveyed the feelings behind the music. Joy, sorrow, hope, and determination flowed through each note, creating a connection with everyone listening. She could see some people leaning forward, their expressions softening as the music touched them. As she continued, her nerves melted away, replaced by a sense of flow and presence. She was no longer thinking about who was watching or what they thought. She was fully immersed in the music, letting it carry her, letting it speak the story she had lived, the struggle, the practice, the perseverance, and the love for the piano that had never wavered. The hall was silent except for the sound of her playing, each note echoing with clarity and emotion. The choir director watched silently, his eyes fixed on her hands and the expression on her face. There was a flicker of surprise and perhaps admiration as he noticed the depth of her skill and the emotion she conveyed. He did not interrupt or comment, but the tension that had hung in her mind for months seemed to dissipate. She realized that she no longer needed his approval. Her music spoke for itself, and that was enough. The final notes resonated through the hall, lingering in the air as if reluctant to fade. She paused for a moment, letting the silence carry the weight of the performance. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started as polite clapping but quickly grew into warm, enthusiastic appreciation. She stood and bowed, feeling a rush of pride and joy. The audience's response was genuine and heartfelt, not just for technical skill, but for the emotion and story she had shared through her music. After the performance, people approached her with smiles, compliments, and encouragement. Teachers, parents, and fellow students praised her playing, expressing amazement at the skill and feeling she had brought to the piece. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. This was the moment she had been working toward, the proof that dedication and perseverance could transform even ridicule into recognition and respect. Later, the choir director approached her. He spoke quietly, acknowledging her growth and talent. He admitted that he had underestimated her and apologized for his harshness during the audition. She listened, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The apology was not necessary for her validation, but it was a sign that her journey had not gone unnoticed. She had faced ridicule, persevered through practice and dedication, and emerged stronger and more confident. The experience of performing at such a large event gave her new perspective on her abilities and her journey. She realized that growth comes gradually, through persistence, reflection, and the willingness to keep going despite obstacles. The ridicule she had faced was no longer a source of shame, but a catalyst that had motivated her to improve and strive for excellence. She understood that success was not simply the applause or recognition of others, but the inner satisfaction of achieving something meaningful through effort and passion. Her mentor continued to guide her, encouraging her to explore even more challenging pieces and to consider future opportunities for performances. She began to envision competing in regional competitions, participating in larger concerts, and perhaps even sharing her music beyond her local community. These goals were ambitious, but she felt equipped to pursue them. Each performance, each practice session, had strengthened her skills, her resilience, and her love for music. The months that followed were filled with new experiences and opportunities. She continued to participate in recitals, workshops, and collaborations with other musicians. Each event brought new challenges, from different audiences to complex compositions, but she approached them with the same determination and focus that had carried her through the audition. She had learned to manage nerves, to stay present in the music, and to convey emotion that resonated with listeners. She also began to mentor younger students, sharing her knowledge and experience. Teaching others allowed her to reflect on her own journey and reinforce the lessons she had learned about patience, perseverance, and self-belief. She encouraged her students to embrace challenges, to practice diligently, and to find joy in the music itself. Through this, she discovered the value of giving back, of helping others find the confidence and love for music that she had cultivated. Despite her growing confidence and recognition, she remained humble and committed to improvement. She understood that mastery was a continuous journey, not a destination. Each new piece presented challenges to overcome, each performance offered opportunities to learn, and each interaction with other musicians enriched her understanding of music. She embraced this mindset, knowing that true artistry involved both skill and heart. One evening, she sat at her piano, reflecting on how far she had come. The memory of the choir director's ridicule no longer caused pain. Instead, it reminded her of the resilience she had developed, the hours of practice she had dedicated, and the joy she had found in music. She played a piece she had composed herself, letting the notes tell her story of growth, perseverance, and passion. The music flowed effortlessly, carrying with it the lessons she had learned and the dreams she still hoped to achieve. Her journey had transformed her. She had moved from a place of doubt and fear to one of confidence and mastery. She had learned that setbacks and criticism could be powerful motivators, that consistent effort could overcome initial failures, and that true success came from within. The applause, recognition, and respect she received were rewarding, but the greatest satisfaction came from her own growth and the joy she felt when playing the piano. As she looked forward, she saw a future full of possibilities. She dreamed of performing on larger stages, sharing her music with wider audiences, and continuing to grow as a musician and as a person. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she also knew that she had the skills, resilience, and passion to meet them. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a means of expressing her deepest emotions. The journey had taught her that true talent was not only measured by skill, but by dedication, perseverance, and the courage to continue despite criticism. She had transformed ridicule into strength, mistakes into learning, and fear into determination. Each note she played was a reflection of her journey, a testament to her hard work, and a celebration of the love for music that had guided her every step of the way. After the success of her performance at the school concert, her life began to change in small but meaningful ways. Invitations to perform at local events started arriving, and people she had never met approached her to compliment her playing. Each recognition, though modest, was proof that her dedication and perseverance were paying off. She began to realize that the ridicule she had faced from the choir director long ago had become a turning point, a challenge that had strengthened her determination and skill. She continued to practice every day, not out of obligation, but because she loved music. Her fingers moved confidently across the keys, and she explored new pieces with curiosity and excitement. She had grown into a musician who understood not just the technical aspects of music, but the emotional depth it could carry. Each performance became an opportunity to tell a story, to connect with her audience, and to express the emotions she sometimes found difficult to convey in words. The choir director, who had once mocked her, now approached her with respect. He admitted that he had underestimated her and acknowledged the growth she had achieved. While she did not need his validation, hearing it was satisfying. It symbolized the journey she had traveled, from doubt and ridicule to confidence and mastery. The acknowledgement was not just about talent. It was about persistence, courage, and the commitment to follow her passion despite obstacles. Her family was proud, but more importantly, they were happy to see her fulfilled. They had witnessed her dedication, her struggles, and her triumphs. They celebrated her achievements quietly, understanding that her growth had come from hard work, resilience, and a love for music that could not be measured by applause alone. Their support remained her foundation, a constant reminder that encouragement and belief from loved ones could empower anyone to overcome challenges. She also found joy in inspiring others. Young students began to look up to her, asking for guidance and tips on playing the piano. She shared her experiences openly, encouraging them to practice diligently and to believe in their own abilities. Teaching others not only helped them but also reinforced her own understanding of music and her journey. It reminded her that success is most meaningful when it can be shared and used to uplift others. Her performances became more polished and expressive. She experimented with complex pieces, pushing her abilities further and exploring the emotional possibilities of music. Each performance was a step forward, a demonstration of the skill and emotion she had cultivated over the months. Audiences were captivated, not just by her technical ability, but by the feeling she put into every note, the story her music told, and the passion that was evident in her playing. Opportunities began to grow beyond her school and community. Invitations to participate in regional competitions and concerts arrived. While the thought of performing on larger stages was initially intimidating, she welcomed the challenge. She approached each new opportunity with preparation and focus, knowing that her previous experiences had equipped her to face greater pressures. Her confidence was no longer fragile. It had been tested and strengthened through each practice, recital, and moment of doubt overcome. She reflected on her journey often, remembering the moments of fear and humiliation that had once made her question her abilities. She realized that those moments had shaped her resilience, teaching her the value of persistence and self-belief. Criticism, once a source of shame, had become a catalyst for growth. She had learned to embrace challenges, learn from them, and transform obstacles into opportunities for improvement. Through her journey, she also developed a deeper understanding of the emotional power of music. She learned that technical skill alone was not enough to move an audience. Music needed heart and authenticity. She infused her performances with her own experiences, emotions, and reflections. Every note she played carried meaning, creating connections with listeners and allowing her to communicate in ways words could not. Her mentor continued to support her, offering guidance and encouragement. He helped her refine her techniques, explore new styles, and push her boundaries. His belief in her potential provided reassurance and motivation, reminding her that growth is a lifelong process. With each lesson, she gained confidence not just in her ability, but in her capacity to keep learning, improving, and sharing her talent with the world. The relationships she had built through music became increasingly important. Collaborating with other musicians taught her patience, empathy, and communication. She learned to listen carefully, to harmonize, and to appreciate the unique strengths of others. These experiences reinforced the idea that music is not only personal but also communal, a means to connect, inspire, and create something greater together. As she continued to perform and grow, She began to receive invitations to teach at workshops and community programs. Sharing her skills and experiences with others became a source of fulfillment. She encouraged young musicians to pursue their passions, to embrace challenges, and to believe in themselves. Through teaching, she discovered that success is not only about personal achievement, but also about empowering others to find their own voices. Her life gradually changed, but not dramatically overnight. Recognition, respect, and new opportunities came through consistent effort, dedication, and perseverance. She realized that real growth is incremental and that patience is essential. Each note, each practice session, and each performance contributed to her development, both as a musician and as a person. One evening, after a long day of practice, she sat quietly at her piano. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, remembering the ridicule, the struggles, and the small triumphs that had defined her path. She played a piece she had composed herself, allowing the music to carry the story of her perseverance, growth, and love for her craft. The notes resonated with clarity and emotion, filling the room with a sense of achievement and fulfillment. She realized that her journey had taught her more than technical skill. She had learned resilience, patience, and the importance of self-belief. She had discovered that passion, dedication, and perseverance are as crucial as talent. Most importantly, she had found a deep, personal connection to music that would continue to guide and inspire her for years to come. As she looked ahead, she saw endless possibilities. Larger stages, new audiences, and more complex pieces awaited her. She felt ready to face these challenges with confidence and grace. The ridicule that had once seemed insurmountable was now a distant memory, a reminder of how far she had come and the strength she had gained. Her journey had transformed her, shaping her into a musician who could inspire, connect, and express through the universal language of music. Her story became a testament to the power of perseverance, passion, and resilience. She understood that obstacles and criticism are not the end, but opportunities to grow stronger, to improve, and to find one's voice. Each note she played was a reflection of her journey, a symbol of her dedication, and a message to the world that talent paired with effort and heart can overcome any challenge. With each new day, she continued to practice, perform, and share her music. She nurtured her skills, explored new opportunities, and inspired those around her. Her journey from ridicule to recognition was complete not because she had achieved perfection, but because she had discovered her own strength, her passion, and her voice. And in the music she created, she found freedom, fulfillment, and the ability to touch the hearts of those who listened.